What is up? It is No Huddle Fantasy Sports. It's Saturday evening, and we are talking NFL Week 8 DFS Top Core Plays. Hey, I've done the homework and I've crunched the numbers, and if you're like me, you don't have much time to waste. So if you're looking for the top players to build your DFS lineups around this weekend, stick with me as we cover it all. Hey, welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports in the Week 8 NFL DFS Core Plays video. You've already made the right choice this week by clicking on this video and finding this channel. But if you're looking for the next best thing you can do this week, go ahead and hit that like button down below for this video and also find that subscribe button so you don't miss any upcoming videos. But before we jump into Week 8, we always like to take a quick look to the previous week's results in an attempt to be transparent and to share with you guys how I did with No Huddle Fantasy Sports in the picks we gave out. With that said, and in an attempt to be honest, last week, Week 7 NFL DFS for us was pretty awful. The picks we gave out, some hit, some didn't, but for the large majority, we did not do very good. Over the last couple of weeks, I would say since Week 4, I've been starting to max out entries, specifically 150 entry contests. I just posted a quick screenshot here of the guys I had and the percentages. So anybody that's highlighted, whether that's green, yellow, or red, are guys that were part of my core plays. So we can just start here quickly going down the list of these highlighted guys. The biggest disaster was the Atlanta game. I had so much Matt Ryan, it wasn't even funny. Over 37% of my lineups contain Matt Ryan, and on top of that, I paired him mostly with Calvin Ridley. Just a horrendous game for Atlanta, a horrendous pick there. It just did not do very well. Other guys, Joe Mixon, Tevin Coleman, Daniel Jones, Cooper Kupp were just whatever. They didn't do very much for us. Dalvin Cook, Hunter Henry were great picks. T.Y. Hilton turned out to be a really good pick. Leonard Fournette was owned by like 95% of people, so it's whatever. He did well, but it didn't really help us. Cole Beasley caught a touchdown. And then, of course, we round out the picks here with a nice red one in Mark Andrews, who's been good week in, week out for Baltimore, except for the week when I go 20% heavy on him. So just not the greatest week on my end. I hope you guys were able to mix and match a little bit to maybe salvage something out of this. But the biggest disappointments, I had zero ownership of Marvin Jones Jr. I had zero Edmonds. I had a couple David Johnson, so that just didn't work out. I just didn't have the guys that really went off. I hope you guys did much better than me, but just to be transparent, here are the picks, the percentage owned I had of those guys. It was not a good week on my end. Finally here, last little bit of an announcement. I've mentioned it a couple times already. As soon as we hit 100 subscribers on this channel, I will be doing a giveaway. We are very, very close to that. I think we're about 10 subscribers away. So pay attention. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe. So again, make sure you pay attention. We should be approaching that within the week. All right, jumping into why you're here and what our picks, our top core plays for Week 8 are. We're going to start out with the quarterback position. First guy I have listed here is Russell Wilson for Seattle. He is the most expensive quarterback, I believe, on both sites, but he is playing away this week in a dome in Atlanta. Huge over-under of 53, and Wilson and Seattle are favored by 7. The most important thing here, the reason why I like him so much, Atlanta is a great matchup. They rank as the worst defense versus quarterbacks this year, the number one in terms of giving up fantasy points to the quarterback position. So far for this year, they're giving up over 270 yards passing per game and over right around 25 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. A lot of people this week will be on Deshaun Watson. I've compared the two, very, very close to me. Russell Wilson is a little bit more expensive on both sides, but they're not too far off in terms of value and their upside. So if you're looking for a guy that's lower owned than Watson, I do really like Watson this week. Russell Wilson should get lower ownership and is that guy. Finally, really quickly, I just noticed as I record this, Matt Ryan has been rolled out for Week 8. Matt Schaub will be under center for Atlanta. That does hurt Atlanta's offense, which of course could mean this game could turn into a blowout, even though Seattle is on the road. I still like Russell Wilson for the same reasons I gave, but given that this could be a blowout, I would rank him side by side with Deshaun Watson right now. So if you want to play Deshaun Watson, I would recommend going there for a little bit more safety, but if you want the upside of having a guy lower owned, Russell Wilson still fits that category. Matthew Stafford is the next guy I've listed here for Detroit. They're playing at home versus the New York Giants with a 49.5 over-under, and they are minus 6.5 point favorites. He, of course, is coming off a great performance in Week 7 against Minnesota, where he threw for 364 yards and 4 touchdowns. All those touchdowns, of course, going to, unfortunately, Marvin Jones, who we did not own last week. But on top of that, there's a lot of different things going on with Detroit. They lost Kerryon Johnson, their starting running back, so that could lead to more of a reliance on the passing game. But more importantly, it's a good matchup versus the Giants, for Detroit's passing game. The Giants currently giving up 257 passing yards a game and just around 19 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position. So we do know that the Giants do struggle a bit against the pass, given those statistics. But if you dive into it a little bit more, you'll notice that the Giants struggle even more on the road against the pass. So for those reasons, I do like Matt Stafford at home against the Giants with a decent over-under this week. But more importantly, as I mentioned, with the news about Matt Ryan being out and Russell Wilson, Matt Stafford will probably be my number one owned quarterback going into week 8. He's a very affordable price, especially on DraftKings, and I believe that they're going to have to continue to move the ball through the air with the loss of Kerryon Johnson. Hey, if we're talking about running backs and that New York Giants-Detroit Lions game, my top recommended back this week is Saquon Barkley for the Giants. Of course, Barkley is coming off an injury, but he did play in Week 7. The good news is he played 88% of the snaps, and on top of that, he took every touch out of the Giants' backfield. So all good things pointed to that the injury is behind him and he's healthy moving forward. And not that you need too many reasons to start Barkley week in and week out, but Detroit offers an elite running back matchup in 2019. They're giving up 115 rushing yards per game to the running back position. That number translates to 4.9 yards per carry to the running back position. Those numbers translate to the second most amount of points, fantasy points given up on DraftKings to running backs at over 32. On FanDuel, that number's over 28. So just an incredible matchup for an incredible running back in Saquon Barkley. Next up, I have Leonard Fournette for Jacksonville listed here. His price is starting to creep up on all sites. Probably a little bit more of a value on FanDuel at $7,700, but you're playing Leonard Fournette week in and week out due to volume. For 2019, if you take away this past Thursday night game, he's number one in the NFL with 172 total touches. That's coming out to over 24 touches a game for Leonard Fournette. You simply have to love that for Jacksonville. Those opportunities are hard to find, and they're usually really expensive, which his price is getting up there, but not quite that top tier level of price. But beyond that, the Jets are giving up a good, decent amount of points to the running back position this year. They're giving up over 29 on DraftKings and over 24 on FanDuel. He is a 3-down back. He's involved in the passing game. Just like I mentioned, for all the reasons I mentioned for Barkley, regardless of how it turns out, he will get his 20, 23, 24 touches per game, whether that's through the air or on the ground. And of course, he's one of the few running backs this week that fits my traditional strategy. He's at home in Jacksonville and favored by 6.5 points. And next up, I have Sonny Michel for New England listed here. He's playing at home versus Cleveland. They are huge favorites at -11. He's relatively inexpensive on both sites at $5,200 on DraftKings, $6,500 on FanDuel. And although he's not having the greatest year considering the opportunities he's had and the offense he plays in, Sonny Michel to me this week is a pure matchup play, as Cleveland ranks as one of the worst teams in terms of stopping the run this year. They're currently giving up over 120 yards on the ground a game and ranked number 2 in the NFL with over 5.2 yards a carry. But more importantly, Michel, even though he hasn't been that great this season, he's still getting the opportunity. Over the last 3 weeks, he's had 20, 24, and 19 carries. He's number 3 in the NFL this year with 24 red zone carries. But more specifically, if we focus inside of the 5, where he really excels and where we really want to focus on running backs, he ranks number 1 this season with 10 attempts inside the 5-yard line. Finally, the last little note I want to mention here, the weather looks to be pretty bad in New England this weekend. So again, we could be seeing more of a run-heavy focused team. But overall, Michel just kind of fits or checks every box for me. He's playing at home. He's a huge favorite. He's getting the workload on the ground, and he's getting all the red zone usage. We could see a big game from him. His price is pretty attractive also. Finally here, my last core play for the week at running backs in a spot that I usually say for a value play, but I bounced a couple guys in and out. I want to focus on Le'Veon Bell for the New York Jets. My strategy this week will be to pay up at running back. I think there's some value to be had, especially at receiver, so I don't have to necessarily find value or cheap guys at the running back position. So I want to give you just who I'm going with, and that's Le'Veon Bell for the Jets. He's underpriced in my mind relative to the field at $6,900 on DraftKings and $7,000 on FanDuel. Of course, he has not performed all that well this season, but I think there's a lot of things that can attribute to that and are suggesting he should improve. But if we want to drill down to some statistics supporting Bell this year, I mentioned he is getting the volume. He's averaging over 21 touches a game. That's top 10 in terms of volume this year with 129 total touches. And his usage remains really, really high. I believe it's number 2 in the NFL at 92%, just behind Christian McCaffrey. Now, the one downside is he doesn't fit my typical strategy in that the Jets are playing on the road in Jacksonville, and they are, I believe, 6.5-point underdogs. But for someone like Le'Veon Bell, that simply does not bother me. He's similar to Barkley in the fact that he's a 3-down back. He's extremely effective, if not their best receiver. And whether the Jets are up or down, Le'Veon Bell will remain involved in the game and get his share of volume. All of that considered, Jacksonville's defense has not been that great this year versus the run. They're kind of falling apart. So they've already obviously gotten rid of Ramsey, which doesn't affect necessarily the running game. But if you focus, I saw a tweet the other day on their linebacking core. I believe they have one linebacker starting this week that has had greater than one snap count in 2019. So that just means Le'Veon Bell and the Jets offense is in a better spot against Jacksonville, even though they're on the road. Like I mentioned, I think all things considered, he's underpriced compared to the field. I think you'll get him at lower ownership than all the other guys in a spot where Le'Veon Bell could explode considering his talent level and the things that are surrounding him in terms of volume and positive regression. Moving on to the wide receiver position, I have 4 guys listed here as my core plays. Kenny Golladay, my first guy listed for Detroit. I already talked about Matt Stafford how much I liked him. Kenny Golladay is that guy. I'm looking to pair with him almost every time. I mentioned I don't think you need to spend up this week at wide receiver. There's a lot of guys in this basically under $6,500 range. But more importantly, Kenny Golladay is in a great matchup this week. He's currently 3rd in the NFL with red zone targets, which I love to see. I know last week he didn't have a great performance because Marvin Jones kind of ate all that up, but he's still the main receiver, the main guy in Detroit. And for me, most importantly this week, Pro Football Focus has Kenny Golladay listed as the top cornerback matchup going up against DeAndre Baker, the Giants. The Giants have really struggled against the pass this year, against wide receivers this year. I really like Kenny Golladay, especially paired with Matt Stafford. Next up, I have John Brown for Buffalo. They're playing at home against Philadelphia, -2.5 favorites. Pretty simple with John Brown here. His price is great, under $6,000 on both sites. And simply put, I mention it every week, the Eagles struggle. They're really, really bad against outside receivers. In fact, they're number 1 in terms of fantasy points given up per game, giving up over 45 points to the wide receiver position on DraftKings and over 38 on FanDuel. You have one of the league's best deep threats, outside receivers, against the Eagles secondary. I'll take that. I'll put money on that all day. And hey, if I'm looking to spend up this week at the receiver position, I will be playing DeAndre Hopkins for Houston, especially if I'm putting any stock into Deshaun Watson. He pairs perfectly with him. Although you don't need much of a reason to play Hopkins week in and week out, he does get a slight usage bump without Fuller on the field, and Fuller's been rolled out for week 8. You're looking at 24 targets over the last 2 weeks, 12 in each week, which obviously is a tick up from where he was earlier in the season. And the matchup is great. The Raiders generally do struggle. They're a top 5 team in terms of fantasy points given up to the wide receiver position. But on top of that, they just traded away their best cornerback. So I don't even know who they have on the field on defense anymore. But the Raiders probably are going to get worse, especially against the wide receiver position. You got to like Hopkins. And finally here for some value, I'm looking at basically all of the Tennessee receivers, but especially Corey Davis. He's only $4,400 on DraftKings, $5,500 on FanDuel. So he offers you a value play on both sites. And all of the Tennessee receivers, like I mentioned, they're all in a top tier matchup this week versus Tampa Bay at home. Tampa Bay's defense has been nothing short of awful this season against the pass and against receivers. I think they're ranked number 2 in terms of fantasy points given up this year, giving up over 44 on DraftKings, over 36 on FanDuel. But more importantly for the Tennessee receivers, they've kind of been underutilized this year with Mariota under center. He's very, very risk adverse. Last week they went to Tannehill. We saw, I guess it would be good things as an upgrade from Mariota. He's pushing the ball more downfield. He's taking a little bit more risk, which is good in terms of the wide receivers. And if you look at Corey Davis last week specifically for Tennessee, with Tannehill under center, he had 6 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. All good things, all things we like to see. He's a great value. All the Tennessee receivers are this week. And finally, on to everybody's favorite position, tight ends. One of the hardest positions week in and week out to get right. The first guy I have listed here is Austin Hooper for Atlanta. Full disclosure, now that we have the Matt Ryan being out this week with Matt Schaub under center, I'm not as high on Atlanta receivers in general and Austin Hooper, but he's a decent price on both sites. Seattle actually offers a top 5 matchup for tight ends, which is a little bit surprising, giving up 12 to 16 fantasy points per game to the tight end position. Austin Hooper himself is having a great year. He's averaging anywhere from 15 to 19 points per game. And over the last 3 weeks, he's accumulated 219 receiving yards and had 2 touchdowns. So all good things. The arrow's pointing up for Austin Hooper. The downside, again, is that we have Schaub and some uncertainty under center right now. So again, I'll be downgrading him, but just keep that in mind. He's in a good spot. The guy I guess I like more than him now is Hunter Henry for the Chargers. He remains a great price on DraftKings, although his price has bumped up a lot on FanDuel. Over the last 2 weeks, we've kind of been waiting on him to come back from injury, and he has shown just some elite upside, especially considering his position. He had 17 targets since he returned from injury, turned that into 14 receptions for 197 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Chicago's defense has not been top tier versus they're currently ranked 11th right now in terms of fantasy points per game given up to tight ends. And of course, each week I mentioned those aren't the only guys. You saw my spreadsheet in terms of how many players I actually get involved. But other considerations this week. First one I got to highlight here is Deshaun Watson for Houston. Again, I might be bumping him, if not even with, then slightly above Russell Wilson, given the news about Matt Ryan. Chris Carson for Seattle. So kind of do this switch. If you're not going to play Russell Wilson, then you got to go Chris Carson. He gets the volume. He's having a great year. They want to run the ball. And given the outcome with Matt Ryan not being on the field for Atlanta, Chris Carson in a great spot. Ty Johnson, he's probably the lowest I'll go in terms of pricing for running backs. He offers a value. Everybody knows this. He'll probably high owned. I'm not going to get too much involved with him. I had him originally listed as a core play, but I'm not considering that anymore. If you look back, Kerryon Johnson he didn't do much. So why is everybody in love with Ty Johnson? Why do they think he's going to get 20 carries? It's beyond me. I don't think that's going to be the case. Golden Tate's in a revenge type of game this week. He's had a great couple of weeks so far for the Giants. I really like him again this week. Courtland Sutton, we saw Emmanuel Sanders get traded. Well, Courtland Sutton's price still reflects Emmanuel Sanders on the team. You could see a big uptick in terms of opportunity and volume for Sutton for Denver. And finally, if you're looking for some other if you're looking for some other tight ends, and if you're going to come off of Austin Hooper, I do like Delaney Walker and Smith for Tennessee. I believe Walker's injured, so that's why I have both listed. So Smith opens up as the starter. That's some huge value at tight end. And boom, so that wraps up our Week 8 NFL DFS top core plays video. If you haven't done so already, please check out our last video regarding matchups for the week. I give you all the spreadsheets, everything. It's linked into the description of the video. It should actually be thumbnailed or whatever it's called linked on this video, so please check that out. And of course, hey, if you're new here or just simply haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel down below. You'll keep up to date with every time I release a video. Not only that, I mentioned at 100 subscribers, we're very, very close. We'll be hitting that soon. I will be doing a giveaway. It'll be worth it, but the only way you'll be a part of that is if you are a subscriber. And finally, I say it every week, but I do truly mean it. Thank you guys for taking the time to find this channel, click into this video, and hang with me as we discuss all things fantasy football. Of course, if you think any of these plays aren't good, or if you have any additional plays or notes that we can benefit from Week 8 in DFS, leave me a comment down below. Otherwise, good luck this week. I hope to see you atop the leaderboards.